Hey guys, it's Katie, and I'm here today to do the Reader Problems book tag. I was tagged by Kara at Wild Book Garden, and this is such a cool tag, so I'm really excited to get into it. 11 questions, so let's get into it. Number 1, you have 20,000 books on your TBR. How in the world do you decide what to read next? Okay, so currently, and probably also for the next at least year, I have to plan my TBR out a year ahead because of my busy schedule and just everything that's going on in my life. I'm in school and I'm a law student and I have somewhat of a job and just a lot is happening. So not only do I have to plan out my year, but I also plan what month I'm going to read what. Those will usually vary, but that's just generally my process. But what I do is on Goodreads, I have want to read shelf. I have a, want to read light shelf, and then I break it down into priority, secondary, and tertiary. So I usually will start with a priority and then I'll go through and pick a few books. But not only do I pick books based on like priority and whatever, but I also do it based on genre. I like to have a mix each year because there are typically certain genres that I like to read at certain times of the year. I will almost always pick majority fantasy because that's just typically what I go for. But I also pick a fair amount of like historical fiction and mystery and occasionally nonfiction. I've been getting more nonfiction into my life in the last year or year and a half or so. But so I like to go through and do genre things. I also like to try and get some of the books off my physical shelf, and then I have a ton of books that I plan to read on my Kindle as well. I know I'm also a mood reader, so I will often pick books that I know I'll be in the mood for certain times of the year. I have just certain quotas that I like to meet for certain things, like I really need to read at least 2 classics a year or something like that. So fitting myself into these constraints that I've built for myself so I can continue to read while balancing all of the chaos in my life. Sometimes though, there are books that'll just come up and I'll just choose to read them on a whim. But that's not super common. I ended up adding a bunch of books this year. A lot of them ended up just being books that I read for school. Some my mom got for me and she told me like you should read this and prioritize this book. So I mean, if there are things like that I just didn't think of that just kind of happen, then I'll just pick them up. But for the most part, I know what I want to read, what I'm going to be in the mood for, and then I'll just add it. Normally, when I don't have time constraints like this that I have to have right now, I'll probably just be a mood reader and pick up whatever strikes my fancy at the moment. But for the next, as I said, like year and a half, I've got to stick to this steady and very strict schedule. Number 2, you're halfway through a book and you're just not loving it. Do you quit or are you committed? Some of you guys have been here for a little while. You might know that I am complete garbage at DNFing books, as in I just don't. And one of the goals I have for myself next year is if I really, really don't like a book, I'm gonna really try to see if I can DNF it. However, I just like in people, I have a lot of faith in books. Just because it's going through this rough patch that I just don't like at this point, it might be good at the end, or it might turn out okay, and I want to see it through to its end. However, if it's like a series or something and I really, really didn't like that book that I read, whether it was the beginning of the series or some other part, I literally just won't continue on. I will just finish that one book and then I will be done. But I just typically don't DNF. Number 3, the end of the year is coming and you're so close, but so far away on your Goodreads reading challenge. Do you try to catch up, and how? My Goodreads challenges tend to be lower because I don't know, I feel like I set them pretty low, or I know that I can reach them by the end of the year, even if I have a few bad months, because I read such vastly different sized books that no matter what, I think I could probably reach it. But at the same time, I shouldn't really set a quota for myself of how much I want to read, so it's just kind of arbitrary, but I do try and stick to it. If I don't finish it, I probably wouldn't be upset. I don't know, because I've always finished the challenges that I've had. And I actually almost always go way over what I said I was gonna, or what I had. So I mean, I don't know how I'd actually react. I know I probably wouldn't binge read a lot of books because I don't like to do that actually. I like to sit with a book and just try and enjoy it as much as I can. Number 4, the covers of a series you love do not match. How do you cope? It used to really not bother me that much. I never used to really think about the covers until I got a lot older. And now I actively, if I like a specific set of covers, I will try and get all of the books in that cover. But I tend to enjoy paperbacks if I even get the physical copy, because 95% of the time I just get everything on ebook because it's reasonably priced. I have everything in one place. I mean, a lot of the books that I do get are on ebook, and my Kindle is ancient. I have a Kindle keyboard and that's in black and white. So I get the pretty picture, but like it doesn't matter in the long run. But if I get it in physical copy, I get them in paperback, and by that point they're all pretty much in the cover that I want, or I am able to find them in the cover that I want. So I guess it's something I'm not explicitly concerned about. Number 5, everyone and their mother loves a book you really don't like. Who do you bond with over shared feelings? I have a really, really good friend in real life. Well, I have a lot of book friends, but I have one in particular, and we have almost the exact same reading tastes and just feelings on books. So there is one example I can give you. Everyone and their mother loves The Kingkiller Chronicle by Patrick Rothfuss. Neither one of us was that much of a fan. We bond over that, for instance. So we text and then we Skype, and we pretty much just talk about books. But number 6, you're reading a book and you're about to start crying in public. How do you deal? Well, let me just put it this way. I rarely read in public because I don't have time, or I'm one of those people who just needs to be comfortable and on a couch or whatever, sitting and just enjoying my book. So I'm like rarely in public while reading. So that's usually not an issue. Number 7, a sequel of a book you loved just came out, but you've forgotten a lot from the prior novel. Will you reread the book, skip the sequel, try to find a synopsis on Goodreads, cry in frustration? Well, because I'm currently playing all of the books that are in a series are currently out and I don't have to wait, I don't really have that problem. But a couple of things that I've done is like I don't mind rereading. It just takes me a long time to read in the first place, so rereading is very time consuming. And another thing I do is, look things up online. That's always a good memory refresher. There's a lot of different threads on particularly Reddit that has a lot of like great synopses or discussions that'll like remind you of things. But also, seriously, talking to other people that have read the book or the series, it's just constantly talking to them about it, especially if you're already super invested, then just constantly talking about it, it just kind of reinforces what you already know, and then you're just more likely to remember it down the line. I'm like that. One series in particular I'm like that with is the Realm of the Elderlings series. I read the first book of the entire series back in September of 2015. And I still remember things that happened in the first book. I don't remember a lot, but I keep talking to my friend or to people that are just getting introduced to the world. It brings things back and it reminds you things and actually enhances where you might be in the series, even though it might be years prior, things can come back. And so, really just talking to people, looking up summaries are probably like the top two that I utilize because, as I said, rereading is just very time consuming. But I'm not opposed to a good old fashioned reread if absolutely necessary. So yeah, those are probably like my top main methods, if you will. Number 8, you do not want anyone borrowing your books. How do you politely tell people nope when they ask? Well, long story short, once again, I don't have a lot of books in physical copy anymore, so I have a lot of them on my Kindle. And it's not impossible, but it's not easy to share them. Or if I can share them, they might not have a device that they can read it on. So then they just know that they can't ask me for that specific book. But if it is a book that I have in physical copy, I don't know, probably make something up and to like get them to go away, or I'm really good at distracting people, like getting them to forget about what they were asking me about and just kind of distracting them from what they were asking me about, and then they'll just forget what they were saying and then not remember for a while or ever. And so that's always fun. But I haven't had this experience for a long time because a lot of my friends just go to the library and get books or get them as gifts or something. So that's not really a huge issue. It was something that I experienced a lot when I was younger. And me being the trusting person that I am would give the book, but then I'd hover. And I'd be a menace about keeping track of where my book went so that I could, actually get it back and whatever. Because I hate it. One of my biggest pet peeves with people is when they ask to borrow a book, you give it to them, and then they don't read it for several months. And you're like, well, if you're not going to read it, then give it back to me. And they're like, no, I'll read it. And then you're waiting for another several months to a year or whatever, and you just never get your book back. Like, what the hell? Give me my freaking book back, bud. But yeah, it's typically a non-issue now, especially since 95% of my friends are not in the vicinity of where I am, especially the ones that read, so that works out. Number 9, reading ADD. You've picked up and put down 5 books in the last month. How do you get over your reading slump? Typically, I guess If I've gotten myself in a reading slump, it's because I'm forcing myself to read a book that I really wasn't digging in the first place at that specific moment. Going back to the beginning of the video, I said I'm a bit of a mood reader and I tend to like plan things for specific times a year. I just don't, if I picked a book for that month and I'm just not in the mood for it, I'll still force myself to read it anyway. So I know that there's a book down the line that I'm really into reading, so I'll just like browse my list and be like, all right, I know I had it planned for this month, but I'm really feeling this book right now, and so I'll read it, and then usually that will get me out of a slump. If not, another thing I do, which, you know, getting out of slumps is different for everybody, but you guys know I read a fair amount of fanfic, and that always cures my reading slumps. Another thing I do is I might just stop reading for a little while. I might just, if a book isn't working for me, I might just close it and then just put all reading aside until I can get out of whatever funk I'm in. And then as I said, I'll browse my list, and if I'm feeling something at that given time or whatnot, then I might just, when I'm feeling ready, I'll go pick up that book and then just get into the swing of things again. 10. There are so many new books coming out that you're dying to read. How many do you actually buy? Realistically, very, very few books. I have a very unusual method of getting some books sometimes, but 9 times out of 10, I don't really buy books. I make lists of books, and then like I'll get them from a friend, or I'll find them online, or I'll, you know, get an ebook for a really reasonable price, because I know, at least for the next, as I said, year and a half, that a new release is not something that I'm really going to read. So I'll just put it on, you know, one of my priority, secondary, tertiary lists, and then decide at some point in the future, when I'm getting nearer to reading it, then I'll look into actually getting the book. But I rarely just buy books on a whim or buy them right away anymore. And finally, 11. After you've bought the new book, you can't wait to get to it. How long do they sit on your shelf before you get to them? Well, as I was saying in the previous question, because I don't just automatically buy it right away and do it, I wait until that year or a couple of months before, so I know I'll read it in a relatively short period of time after I've gotten it. But it can range anywhere from days, because there are a few, a very, very few, rare few books that I do this with, but there are a few that I'll just get and then I'll read right away. But the longest I think that I'd let a book sit after I've gotten it, because I have a specific time or a specific specific time I want to read it, or a specific month I want to read it in a year, and that month's already passed or something, then I'll probably just wait at maximum a year. I've had way more books sit longer. Like, I've had some books that I haven't read that I got when I was like 10 or 11 that I still haven't read. And I'm 25 now, so like 15 years or something like that. Let's just go with the old law school answer and say it depends. So yeah, those are all the questions, and I think I know who's done this tag. So I might go browse around and then tag a few people in the description. But if I don't, then anyone who wants to do this tag that hasn't done it and thinks it looks really cool and interesting, consider yourself tagged. And make sure you link me either on Twitter or in the comments below so I can come watch, because it's just such a fun and interesting tag. I keep saying that, but even though a lot of the questions are really repetitive, they're also just fun. I don't know. I love doing tag videos, obviously. But yeah, that's pretty much all I've got for you today. So as always, feel free to like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media. I have a Twitter and a Goodreads and other social media on request if you would like. But my Twitter and Goodreads are linked in the description box below. And I will come back with another video for you guys again soon. Okay, bye!